Welcome to Digital Hauntology, a channel where I write essays about video games. Sometimes these are done in review form, and other times they are more editorial in nature, where I use the games that I am covering as a jumping off point to discuss other topics. But today's video is part 2 of a more informal project on this channel, called Ranking Every Video Game Ever Made. In part 1, I ranked every game covered in the first 10 videos on this channel. And today I'm going to be ranking every game covered in the 5 videos since then, with this becoming the new pattern for the channel, a new ranking video after every 5 video essays released. All this is being done in an attempt to have an answer for that weird question that we all get sometimes, which is, what is the best game that you've ever played? And hopefully, by the end of this video, I'll be one step closer to having an answer for that type of question. So, with this introduction out of the way, on to the video. Hi, I am the dude behind this Digital Hauntology channel. You can call me Haunt, you can call me Mr. Hauntology, or you can call me by my real name, which is Nick. If this is your first time seeing me or my channel, welcome, and I'm glad to have you. And if you're somebody that's been following me for a little bit, it really is awesome. Thank you. So, I already kind of went over it in the intro, but today I'm going to be adding to a list that I started in a video called Ranking Every Video Game Ever Made. And yeah, let's take a look at where we left off. So, here we go. A little bit of housekeeping. Time's gone on since I made the first episode, and really, this little cluster of 3 games has been kind of bothering me. I don't want to make a habit of this, editing the list over and over again, but, you know, opinions can change. And really what was bothering me here was Astro's Playroom's placement. In a lot of ways, my opinion of that game has only solidified. I think that it is an incredible game with amazing platforming, awesome music, and it's just really tight and fun to control, especially with all the haptic feedback and kind of novel concepts that they put into the PlayStation 5's DualSense integration. I have gone back to that game multiple times just to try my hand at the speedrun mode, and yeah, like, it doesn't make sense where it is. Vampire Survivors, I think I can keep it where it is. Really awesome game, recommend it. They got into version 1.0 and they added some Moonspell DLC. I think my opinion on that game softened a little bit. I think that, you know, it's just gotten a little long in the tooth, and the new DLC, while it did add some cool stuff, it kind of came with a map that was too big and some weapons that kind of served the same function that of stuff that already was in the game. Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin. Yeah, man, like, I really enjoyed that game when I played it, and I still enjoy it. I think that it is stupid and awesomely written, and I love Jack Garland. It was a really cool thing to see the story of Final Fantasy 1 kind of retconned in this fun and interesting way. But I have, like, no desire to go back. They added some DLC to the game, and I, you know, thought about it. And I was just ultimately like, nah, like, I've seen what that game has to offer. And whereas Astro's Playroom, I keep, you know, wanting more. So, to get this list a little bit more in line with my opinions, I'm going to switch Astro and Stranger of Paradise. Let me see how that looks real quick. So, sorry, there's a plane flying right over my house. Okay, so that list, yeah, that matches my opinions far closer now. And so, yeah, without further ado, let's get on to the rest of the video. So, the first game that I'm going to cover today, the first game that I covered since making this video, the last video, is going to be the third in the Voice of Cards Now trilogy. I would have said series, but it looks like it's done for now from what I've read online. So, Voice of Cards, The Forsaken Maiden, was a game that, as you can see, I put it in the number 3 spot. It's a game that I loved. I thought that the combat was just incredible. It got, you know, kind of extreme when you were taking on the super bosses in that game, so much so that, like, I was manipulating the speed stats of certain equipment just so I can get that perfect turn order. And yeah, like, awesome world building, awesome characters, just terrific scenario writing. I can't really speak higher of the game. It's one of my favorite short term. Sorry, it's one of my short. It's one of my favorite like low budget experimental RPGs that I've ever played. And yeah, like man, yeah, where I live right by a kind of small airport, so you get airplanes all the time. So naturally, with Voice of Cards: The Forsaken Maiden being a game that I enjoyed as much as I did, I was excited as hell for the third game in the series, Voice of Cards: Beast of Burden. I really was just looking forward to it, and in a lot of ways, it met my expectations. Um, I think that the story is arguably one of the best in that trilogy. I think that the pacing is the best for sure. I think that the characters, the party, they might be the best too. And some of the world building is just awesome. But where the game failed was that they decided to implement a new system where it was kind of Dragon Quest monsters or Pokemon, where you fight enemies and then after a battle you have an opportunity to have a chance at having one of those monsters turn into a skill card, and that becomes the way that you change your characters around. Every character can hold, I think it was like 4 or 5 skill cards at a time, and you got some interesting builds out of that. But there was really a messed up RNG aspect to collecting those cards. You'd fight an enemy, have an opportunity to get a card, and then if you didn't get it, you'd have to go back, grind the area until you find that same enemy again, and hope it drops the card this time. And really, that added probably 10 to 15 hours of playtime to my game, and it dragged and killed a lot of the awesome pacing. So, yeah, it's definitely not going to be as high up as The Forsaken Maiden. And let's think where we're going to put that. I think that realistically, I'm going to put it here. In a lot of ways, Diablo 2 Resurrected and Stranger of Paradise are both games where you are constantly fighting monsters over and over again, trying to get loot. And in a lot of ways, that is what Voice of Cards: The Beast of Burden ultimately ended up being, even though it was structured around a much more like awesome narrative with some cool characters. And I think that, yeah, like, actually, you know what? Now that I just kind of broke it down in that way, I think I could put it here. Yeah, there were some frustrating parts about it, but when I think about everything in like more of the mechanical meets the narrative standpoint, I think that, yeah, we'll put it in the number 7 spot. So is that the Beasts or just no? It's just Beasts of Burden. Okay, take a look at that. Yeah, I like where that is. So the next game that I covered on this channel was a game that really is probably the most responsible for a lot of you people watching, and that was Valkyrie Elysium. That was the first channel that I've ever done, or the first video on this channel that I've ever done where for some reason the YouTube algorithm just kind of liked it a little bit. So if you're following me from that video, awesome. Like, great to see you again. But Valkyrie Elysium. Yeah, and kind of thought about doing this a little bit, a little prop. Valkyrie Elysium was a game that I just kind of saw on the store shelf, and I was like, yeah, I want to play a game in the Valkyrie Profile series. I had never played one before, and turns out this was not the best place to start that. It was a cool action game. I really liked the combat. I liked some of the characterization, but a lot of the stuff that wasn't directly tied to combat was just kind of there. Shoddy, kind of, stilted dialogue. Yeah, kind of drab kind of enemy design, drab environmental design. But I ended up liking the game far more than I thought I would have. I even went far as I even went as far as to go and platinum the game, and I played it, all the DLC, everything that was added, and I had a good time. It just was a little vanilla in a lot of ways. So, that said, I kind of know exactly where to put that one. It's going to be right here. So, Valkyrie, Elysium. Yeah. Yeah, that's the best space. Now, real quick, I should probably just say that up until this point right here, I would argue that every one of these games is good to great to even amazing. Valkyrie Elysium's just kind of good, but there's a lot of stuff not to like. Five Nights at Freddy's, there's some problems. So, yeah, that's perfect right there. So the next game that I covered on this series was going to be a 2-for-1 special. I did both a Plague Tale games. And a Plague Tale Innocence, the first in the series, it wasn't even something I was intending on playing. Really, what I wanted to do was jump into a Plague Tale Requiem because I was told by a friend, you got to play this. And so I jumped into it, and I got maybe like 2 hours in, and I go, I am missing a lot of context. I need to go back and play the first one because I don't get what's going on, and I'm not really like clicking with it. So let's give it a shot. So Plague Tale Innocence, in a lot of ways, it's a really strong narrative-based game with some awesome performances and some great writing, dope scenarios, and then they have some really cool like rat tech. If I had to compare it to any other game, I would compare it to early Naughty Dog stuff. Maybe like Drake's Fortune, maybe the first Last of Us, even though maybe that's not fair. But it does play similarly to Last of Us, where you're constantly sneaking through the environment, trying to avoid threats, picking up just tons and tons of junk on the ground to make your new craftables, and then you have this environmental component of like a plague and stuff, whereas it's cordyceps in The Last of Us. But yeah, really awesome game. But when I talk about Requiem, yeah. So let's just see, where would I put that? And I already know. I'm gonna put it right here. A Plague Tale Innocence, in a lot of ways, is a terrific starting point for what became a great series. But in a lot of ways, it was kind of a bummer to play at times. And some of that was on purpose. Thematically, a game taking place during the Black Death is going to be a bummer. And then there were just some like small issues with mechanics that I just didn't like. Like some of the level design didn't really work the way that they thought it would because like AI scripting. And then there was some issues with combat where they put you in scenarios where you kind of had to rapidly swing a sling at enemies, and the auto lock on was just not up to the task. But still a solid game. So, a Plague Tale Innocence. Yeah, that makes sense to put it there. And then we're going to get to its bigger brother, A Plague Tale Requiem. A Plague Tale Requiem is better in every way than Innocence. Better acting, better characterization, better writing all across the board. The scenarios that they put you in the game are just bleak, man. And yeah, that game just mechanically was better. You need to play A Plague Tale Requiem. If you haven't played it, watch my video on it, but it is just a bummer of a time, and I really think that I think it's a better game in a lot of ways than even The Last of Us, and I think that it compares a lot in a lot of ways to The Last of Us 2. I know people kind of have differing opinions of which of those two games were better, but without having played them in a long time, this game just nailed everything it was trying to do. So it's definitely going to be better than A Plague Tale Innocence. And so where am I going to put it? This is interesting, right? Because like this game right here, I adore it, and it is a busted game in a lot of ways, but it meant a lot to me in terms of what it was doing thematically. So in a lot of ways, that has kind of become the separator from like the top half to the bottom half of you know the separator between good and great video games. And I think A Plague Tale Requiem is better than not only that, but I think it's even better than Voice of Cards, The Forsaken Maiden. Now, Visage, no. Visage is still one of the best games I've ever played. It is the best horror game I've ever played. It's the scariest game. It's just so fucking like compacted, and everything about that game just nailed what it was trying to do. Yeah, I can't go any higher than that. I think that's the game that stops A Plague Tale from hitting the top of this list in a lot of ways. Um, but yeah, I think that's the spot that it makes the most sense for me. Yeah. All right, so the next game that I covered, it's kind of, in a lot of ways, partially responsible for Valkyrie Elysium being as low as it is. After I made my video on Valkyrie Elysium, all of the comments kind of came in like three flavors. It was either, what the fuck are you talking about? This game is bad. Or, I thought it was okay. I just wish it was a little cheaper. But the majority of the comments really came down to, hey, why haven't you played the other Valkyrie profile games? Like, if you've played those, you'll know this doesn't deserve the name. And while I wouldn't go that far, I think Valkyrie Elysium has its place. I think that it's kind of like more of like a Muso style game, kind of similar to Persona 5 Strikers or Dragon Quest Heroes. But Valkyrie Profile was awesome to play. After reading those comments and then after seeing it was on the PlayStation Store for a new re-release on the new consoles, I was just like, yeah, we're jumping in. And I get it. I get why that game is the cult classic that people consider it to be. Um, the Einherjar storytelling, just going and finding these wounded or dying warriors and adding them to your party. I think there's like 20 of them or something like that. All of those stories were really cool. The structure of the game being based around kind of like a ticking clock was awesome. And the combat. There's a combo system in that game that just is so refreshing and still new. Like, it's still novel in 2023 when the original game came out, I think in 2000 in the US, 99 in Japan maybe. And to this day, it's action style turn-based RPG, like mechanical combat. I don't know, man. It's still awesome today. Like when you first start it, you're just kind of using these buttons that correspond to every single party member, and it starts off like 1, 2, 3, 4. But by the end of that game, you're doing Marvel vs. Capcom 3 combos on these enemies, and that's really what like I keep thinking about when I look back to that game. There were cool thematic stuff, but like the combat is just so sick. But that game's design is a little antiquated and in a lot of ways just opaque. I would not have made my way through that game if it wasn't for a guide. I even had to like restart a playthrough because I was just like, why am I struggling so much in the combat? And it turned out I had just kind of missed certain items that were really important for your progression. And yeah, like some dungeons that are just overly too big with convoluted puzzles. And I would not have made my way through the perfect ending or true ending if it wasn't for a guide. I don't even know how you could do that without a guide. It's it's a pretty involved process. But in terms of putting it on this list, I think I'm gonna put it here. Yeah. It is a cult classic. It deserves all the respect and the love that it's ever gotten. I do recommend it, especially on the PlayStation 5 for like 20 bucks. Are you crazy? It used to be like 300 if you wanted a used copy. Um, Valkyrie Profile Lenneth was something that I'm so glad I got to play. But compared to Astro's Playroom, which was always a joy to play, where I was kind of bumping my head against Valkyrie Profile, yeah, I can't put it above it. But I can put it above A Plague Tale Innocence because similarly, I was bummed out while playing that game too. Again, both Plague Tale and Valkyrie Profile are bummer games. The world's ending in both of them, for different reasons, of course. But yeah, let me put it here. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going to put it. Okay, so the final game to add today. And yeah, it's going to be Forspoken. A lot of people got a lot to say about that game, and mostly not good. I did like playing Forspoken. I liked the traversal of the world. I thought it was a pleasure to just kind of run through the environments. I liked the spell effects. I liked the combat, even though I wish there were better enemy diversity so that I can really learn ins and outs of it. It's one of those games where you have all of these options, but the actual like objectives of the game never test you. So you kind of just fall on whatever works for you in a lot of cases. But realistically, people, the discourse of that game has been talking a lot of shit on how cringe the writing was and talking about how awful the character was of Frey. I disagree a little bit. If you watch my video, you can see that even though I wouldn't consider myself to be the biggest fan of Frey, I empathized with her. And I didn't think that the writing was as cringy as like people that have kind of clip-chimped that game or the trailers to kind of show it off as. But the game has problems. And it's mostly in the world design. The game is far too big and far too bland for what they're trying to do. And it's a bummer because that game had a lot of potential. It just never truly realized it. So where am I going to put it? We're definitely not. Let's go to the bottom of the list and see where we can put it. It's better than that. Better than Elysium. Yeah, I would argue it's better than Voice of Cards: The Isle Dragon Roars. I think that this is a novel game that was pretty cool. I liked the motif that they carried throughout the series. The music is incredible. The music in Forspoken is better than you think too, though. If you haven't listened to that OST, it's pretty solid. And I guess if I were to put it anywhere, I'd probably put it right under Diablo 2 Resurrected. This is Diablo 2 Resurrected on the PS5. That's why it says it there. But Diablo 2 Resurrected on the PS5, it had some issues with matchmaking, and it kind of detracted from the old school BattleNet stuff. And then there was no mouse and keyboard controller, which is crazy. But yeah, at the end of the day, that's still Diablo 2. It's still super fun to play, and you can get hours and hours of fun, and then you add the new remodeled character designs and all that, and new graphics, and the game is beautiful. I think why I would put Forspoken above Voice of Cards: The Isle Dragon Roars is that's kind of a paint by numbers RPG, and then maybe at the end they kind of get into some weird territory. Yoko Taro was involved with that, so you can't be too surprised, but the majority of Isle Dragon Roars was pretty vanilla. And I think that even though Forspoken has its problems, I think in some core ways it did swing for the fences. And so I find it infinitely more interesting. And I had a better time with it. I wish I could put Forspoken higher. I did enjoy it quite a bit. But no, this is where it's going to rest, I think. So that's it for today. I'll see you again after I've done another 5 essays. And until then, do the like, comment, subscribe, YouTube stuff for me, please, if you can, or if you want to. And if, how about, anybody that's watching this, throw a game that you'd like to see me cover on this channel in the comments, and we'll see where it ends up stacking up in a later iteration of this list. Yeah, so I'm out today, but thank you for watching. You're all beautiful people, and I hope you have a great day.